When I took my first steps in Ferelden, I can assure you that I was not ready for the adventures to come. Before jumping in, I had certain expectations, and today I'm going to talk about how Dragon Age Origins mostly surpassed all of them, but I'll also discuss a few things that I didn't enjoy as much. Spoiler warning for the entire game, though I won't be talking about any of the DLCs as I still haven't played any of them. If you're looking for something spoiler free, I will link in the description my Should You Buy video, which was released about 2 weeks ago, and it's spoiler free. Alright, let's talk about some of the things that happen early in the game and kind of the first signs that I was going to have a great time with this game. Let's begin with the very first thing. Character creation. It was my first time interacting with a system like the background system, and it's such a good idea to have a separate short story tied to your background. I personally went with a Dalish elf, and while the story was pretty generic and certainly didn't impact me in a huge way, I still think that it did an amazing job at giving my character more meaning, and it really helped me also understand what it means to be a Dalish elf. It gave me and my character some goals that were not really tied to the main story, but instead were all based on the choice that I had made, and I thought that was pretty cool. For example, towards the end of the game, among the rewards that I could claim from the ruler for Ferelden, I could ask for land for the Dalish people. So it was really interesting to see how everything related to the background I chose got a nice conclusion, and I assume that there is something similar for the other backgrounds as well, so it just makes me very interested to replay this game to see how the other options impact the game differently as well. Once this short introduction story is concluded, of course we leave for Ostagar with Duncan, and I remember thinking right at that point in the game, I hope I'm going to keep some of my companions because they keep dying or being taken away. You know, I want to form some bonds. And then the Grey Warden ritual happened. Yeah, you're not going to keep the same companions for now, let me tell you that much. When Duncan took his sword and killed Jory, I was shocked. And then after that, there's so much impactful stuff happening. Among other things, we face our first real encounter against the Darkspawn army at the Battle of Ostagar, and I think it's at that point that I realized something. With Duncan's death, Teyrn Loghain's betrayal, the cutscenes, the music, the emphasis and care that they put on having a strong and emotional story, I just loved everything about it. And that's when I realized that I was going to have a great time with this game, but also what kind of game it really was. Amazing with the narrative stuff, while the rest, while good, was clearly not what made the experience special for me up to that point. Switching topics a bit, I think it's also worth pointing out that the graphics were very enjoyable for me, and I think it's been pretty consistent throughout the experience. I guess it will come down to personal preferences, but I think that while it's definitely showing its age, of course, it's still very pretty to look at. It feels to me like they tried to have a pretty realistic approach overall. The cities are not filled with bright colors and arcadey/cartoony stuff. It's dark fantasy, and I felt like the world from the visual and immersion standpoint was a pleasure to explore. Now, after Ostagar, obviously things open up quite a bit. We get to choose where we want to go next, but we also have a main goal: unite Ferelden as much as possible to gather armies and be ready for the coming Blight. I think that making difficult decisions all throughout the game, always for the same goal, and finally at the end, seeing the consequences and kind of everything coming together, you know? It just enhances the final hours of the game so much that the ending of the game was just crazy for me. But overall, I must say that I enjoyed every single location a great deal, except Orzammar for some reason. It's also the last place that I went to, so maybe I was getting ready to use all of the other armies that I had already gathered up to that point. But I think that overall it was definitely visually interesting, being underground and all that, but I think that the entire story just wasn't as satisfying as the other ones, and it was also pretty overwhelming with all the new terms and all the new words that they were using there. Story-wise though, I made sure that Harrowmount would be the king, which according to the ending might have been a bad idea, but honestly I didn't really feel like I had enough information about Balin and Harrowmount to make an informed decision. Maybe I missed some stuff, but it felt like I based my decision mostly on first impressions, which probably isn't the best for naming a king. The Circle Tower, Basilian Forest, and Redcliffe Castle all had similar storylines, I'd say, which at first glance could be a bit annoying, you know? Especially if, like me, you did all of them one after the other, because they all have a very similar structure to them, where you get there wanting to ask for help, but it turns out that there is some kind of evil that's preoccupying them and they need your help first. Fortunately though, I think that all three very quickly show that they have distinct things to bring to the table, and they certainly all have strong stories and characters. The feeling of completing the major quest lines and then hearing the same song every single time playing in the background, it's just so satisfying.
She's gone, and we're human. I can scarcely believe it.
Like I said earlier, you're really working for the same goal the entire game, and it makes it feel like one big coherent experience, and it makes it truly special in my opinion. If I had to choose a favorite location between the four that I've mentioned so far, I think that I'd probably go with Redcliffe Castle. Granted, it's not the most impressive place visually, I'd probably still go with it mostly because Arl Eamon ends up playing a massive role in the story, and I thought that the characters there were a bit stronger overall. Even though I hate Isolde for what she did to Alistair in the past, but that was also another reason why I thought that Redcliffe was such a great location. Alistair's link to this place was very interesting to explore. Alright, now let's talk about another main location that I haven't talked about yet, Denerim, the capital of Ferelden. It's obviously an important location, and we spent a lot of time there, and I'd say that it's time well spent. It deserves its own section in the video because, contrary to many other parts of the game, most of it is story and not much combat. There is obviously some, but overall it's a way more varied experience with things like talking to Goldana, Alistair's sister, planning with Arl Eamon, saving Anora from the Denerim estate, stopping the sale of slaves and the Elven alienage, or taking care of some bandits. It does not get nearly as repetitive, but it also doesn't have the same highs as the other regions of the game when it comes to the resolution of the stories especially, because it feels like we don't really get as invested in each of them, instead we are given a bunch of things to do, but it's definitely a nice breath of fresh air in my opinion, but I could certainly understand why for some people it might seem like a weaker part of the game. Obviously, Denerim is also home to many important moments like Teyrn Loghain's death or the battle against the Blight, but these are events that are kinda built throughout the game and just happen to have their resolution here. I guess I was mostly talking about the storylines that are unique to Denerim. Speaking of Denerim, like I said, it's the location where we get to choose the fate of Teyrn Loghain, the main human antagonist in the game, and I must say that while he is truly a powerful enemy to face, as shown with his victory in the Landsmeet vote, I still struggle a bit to understand his motives. I guess he wanted to betray King Cailan because he thought he was weak, and in his mind he was doing everything for Ferelden. But he also let many Grey Wardens die in the process, and he seems, I don't know, completely wrong almost all the time, despite, I guess, still truly trying to do his best for Ferelden, which, I know, seems arguable just with the actions that he is taking. I certainly feel like the game could have done a better job giving a bit more purpose and personality to Loghain in particular. He felt a bit like a generic bad guy, but at the end of the day, he's only another obstacle in preparation for the true enemy, the Darkspawn. But yeah, Loghain is just a terrible dude that needs to be put down, and by the way, don't even get me started on this. He is absolutely dying at the end of the Landsmeet. Having him potentially becoming a warden could be interesting, certainly, especially if he could be the one sacrificed while slaying the Archdemon, but he is just not worth the risk in my opinion. The dude is messed up in the head, and I don't care how sad Anora might be that he dies, he is absolutely dying. The best thing that could happen to the thing that he is trying to protect is that he should be dead. That's the best thing for Ferelden, and it feels pretty damn good to avenge Duncan and many others as my character delivers the killing blow. Following his death, another pretty meaningful decision has to be made by the player. Should Alistair or Anora be the new king or queen? I think that there is also an option where they can marry each other, which might be the best of both worlds honestly, but after asking Alistair, I knew that I wouldn't try that because he was clearly against it. Unfortunately, I feel like I didn't really know Anora very well, and in my mind, she would probably be seen as a more logical choice for the throne in the eye of the public because she's been queen for a while, and while Alistair does have the blood advantage, well, he's still bastard, and I heard many people in the city worrying about that. With that being said, I knew Alistair way better, of course, and while I'm not sure that he has the qualities required of a king, I'd still trust him with my life. I don't have to question his moral compass and things like that. But, ultimately, I have to go with Anora. I cannot force my best friend, pretty much, to wear the crown if he doesn't want it. Even if it means that we get a worse ruler. It's not my call to make for him, and the fact that in his life he has already been heavily impacted by other people deciding for him where he needed to go and what he needed to do, which ultimately forced him to be raised away from his family, I just can't. He seems happy enough to be a Grey Warden, and I don't see myself changing that at all. Maybe if there's a way to convince him, that could work, but I won't be the one forcing the crown on him, even if it disappoints Arl Eamon. Now, let's tackle Morrigan's baby proposal. Yeah, that sounds weird. It's weird. That's the last big story decision that I'll talk about today. It's so unexpected, and yet I said yes. Similarly to Alistair, by the end of the game, my trust in Morrigan is very high, even though she certainly has some weird tendencies and questionable preferences at times. But if she thinks that the baby can save the Warden, delivering the final blow to the Archdemon, well, I trust her. The fact that the baby will carry the essence of the Archdemon in him is quite concerning, and it definitely makes me wonder why she wants to study it, though what she says right here is reassuring to me.
Allow me to say that what I seek is the essence of the old god that once was, and not the dark forces that corrupted it. Some things are worth preserving in this world. Make of that what you will.
While it is unknown what the future of the baby will look like, and overall it's a pretty messed up idea, I'm ultimately agreeing because of something that she says.
Consider the possibility that Riordan may not be there to make the final blow as he plans. What then? Do you run away? Do you let Alistair, the future king of Ferelden, take the blow instead? And what if he does not make it to the Archdemon either? Would you truly choose death rather than lay with me for one night? Would you deny yourself the tomorrows and all its rewards?
While I wouldn't care if my character died, if it can save Alistair or even Riordan, and in addition I trust Morrigan's motives, I don't really see why I'd decline. It's definitely one of the most questionable and arguable decisions that I have talked about today, mostly because of, like I said, Morrigan's unknown interests, but overall I'm okay with this. All of this leads us to the final battle. The Battle of Denerim against the Archdemon and his army of Darkspawn. This is the first and only time I teared up while playing the game. Everyone is coming together after more than 45 hours with the game, and Anora delivers a pretty powerful speech, and with the goddamn music, I mean, if it doesn't get you pumped up for the upcoming battle, nothing will.
Today, we save Denerim! Today, we avenge the death of my husband, your King Kaelan! But most of all, today, we show the Grey Wardens that we remember and honor their sacrifice! For Ferelden! For the Grey Wardens!
Seeing that every single companion that I had recruited up to that point would be involved in some way was amazing. I was pretty damn happy that Muzduggo, who had been left on the sidelines for the most part, would finally get into some action. So yeah, I really enjoyed the gameplay sequence where we go back to the gates and we control the rest of our companions that we didn't pick. It's definitely unexpected and it's a nice touch to involve everyone. Then we get some pretty epic cutscenes with Riordan, who injures the Archdemon but ultimately dies trying, and it's finally our turn to quite literally try to save the world. The final fight is certainly good. If it wasn't for the broken textures on the ground, it would be even better, and yes, we'll talk about how the game runs on modern PCs shortly, but yeah, it's a good fight. It's definitely one of the best in the game, and it's pretty epic. I mean, just visually, the Archdemon is really cool looking. Obviously, after defeating him, no one dies, and Morrigan is never seen again. It's followed by celebrations with Queen Anora and the people, and it's a beautiful way to conclude an amazing experience. We can then talk with the companions, see what they're up to and just how they feel, and finally we get a summary of what happens in the next few years and how our decisions impacted the future of the world. There are so many impactful and difficult choices to make, and it's really nice to get a summary of the consequences and instantly regret some things but also be proud of some of them. I don't remember playing a game ever that allowed me to have such a huge impact on the world itself, and the ending is certainly a satisfying closure. Alright, before going too far in the video, I guess I need to address the elephant in the room. The game runs very poorly on modern PCs, and it's quite disappointing. I personally managed to make it work without mods or downloading anything, but it certainly was a bumpy road, and I probably crashed maybe 15-20 times total. Other times it was textures that were not loading, and overall it was very annoying, but it was also clearly worth the pain for me. For someone who's not necessarily as hooked with the story as I was, I can see this being a reason to refund or even leave a negative review, but at least for me it wasn't enough to make the overall experience significantly worse. And I mean, it seems all fixable, it's just annoying to have to do research and take some time for this because you'd expect a popular game such as this one to run well. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, let's go back to some good stuff. Let's talk about lore. There is an absurd amount of lore in this game. It's a very rich experience, and if you want to take your time to learn about this masterfully crafted world, there's a lot to sink your teeth into. I certainly need to mention the Codex, which is a pretty handy tool to learn more about the characters, locations, and everything related to lore. It's very, very massive, and a player can spend a lot of time reading all of it, should it be something interesting for them. The next thing I want to talk about is the impact of playing with a party of 4 members. This was my first experience with anything close to a CRPG or a party-based RPG, and I must say that while I ended up really liking this game, it was not necessarily because of the differences in gameplay between this and, say, a regular RPG like Skyrim or The Witcher. And when it comes to the gameplay, my biggest disappointment with the game has to do with enemy and map design. It feels to me like while the look and atmosphere of the areas and even the enemies is usually distinct and varied enough, the game still gets a bit repetitive gameplay-wise because the enemies almost all act the same despite very few differences. Enemies rarely have impactful abilities unless they are mages, and even then a lot of the mages feel the same. The map design also has many of the same problems where it's very similar in structure, and I feel like many of the areas could have been shortened a bit. Frankly, the only moments where I was getting bored playing this game were when I'd faced the same enemies for the 10th time in a very similar looking room. On the other hand, I really enjoyed the options that the game gives to the players. Managing a party of 4 characters with different abilities and inventories leads to a level of strategy that I had never really experienced in another RPG. So I really don't have many complaints with the design of combat or the class/ability designs. My complaints are really about the enemies that I am interacting with while in combat. Each encounter is usually a little bit different from the last at least, be it because of a different room or enemy placement, so yeah, you still need to think a bit. I think it's also fair to say that the combat system can be overwhelming, especially at first, but pretty quickly I started understanding the various commands and things like tactics, and I'd say that it was a fine introduction to the genre, and pretty quickly I felt like I knew what I was doing. I'm not sure if it's for everyone, obviously, but if anything, this game has shown me that if there was a bit more care and work put into the combat encounters themselves, I think that I would like games with similar combat systems a lot, which is getting me excited to try other things like Divinity Original Sin or Baldur's Gate 3. Now, beyond how having 4 companions impacts combat, it also impacts the narrative experience quite a bit. It really enhances things, and I think it's my favorite addition resulting from the party-based experience. Each companion has a distinct and interesting background, which leads to awesome ambient dialogue, and I found myself pretty often stopping what I was doing just to listen to what they were saying, because to me it was just as important as the main story itself almost. I think that the game does a fantastic job at making sure that they are very different, so it leads to interesting stuff like Morrigan and Leliana talking together about the existence of the Maker, with Leliana obviously being a firm believer while Morrigan couldn't care less, and yeah, it's just entertaining. Like, your party is part of the experience in a major way, and I think that's something that I was surprised by and definitely enjoyed. I think exploration in the game is fine. The game definitely allows for a lot of it, and many of the side quests are tied to exploration in the areas that you go through, but overall I felt like it was rarely worth the time, especially with the already mentioned repetitive gameplay, but also the rewards I usually found, and even most of the rewards from completing side quests were usually quite a bit disappointing. Maybe I simply got unlucky with the ones I did, and I'd say I still appreciate that the world was designed in a way that gives the players the choice to search areas and find some stuff. In conclusion, as I have discussed throughout the video, I certainly wasn't expecting such a strong and deep story like this, but also a ton of lore and excellent writing. While the combat was certainly repetitive and lacked variety, it was mostly acceptable because I enjoyed the various strategies that I could come up with my own party, which is really where the interesting parts of combat were for me. With all of that being said, I feel like some of the areas could have been shortened a little bit by taking out some of the repetitive gameplay, or instead just making what was there a bit richer. But overall, it's a fantastic game and I need to try pretty hard to find things that I didn't like. I came in expecting to play a good RPG, but I'm leaving this experience instead having found one of my absolute favorite RPGs of all time. Make sure to share in the comments your personal thoughts about the game. I'd definitely be interested to hear your opinion. My future content plans for Dragon Age are 2 videos for the sequels, 1 for each, potentially also a video for the Veilguard once it releases, but even with Origins, I'll probably be back to talk about the DLCs once I play them, maybe also discuss in depth some of the story decisions. I also plan to play every single background in the game, which might lead to another video. I guess we'll see. This has truly been an amazing experience, and I hope that I did the game justice with this video. If you think that I did, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.